Hello, everyone. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. The Hey Chaplain podcast is a place where members of the law enforcement community share their wisdom and experience through me, the chaplain, so that they can encourage others who wear the badge. On Hey Chaplain, you'll hear from dispatchers and federal agents, sheriffs and U.S. Marshals, as well as local detectives and patrolmen in my hometown of Kansas City. From the LAPD to Scotland Yard, the guests on Hey Chaplain deliver advice and insights so that police officers everywhere can survive and thrive. The average age of an LEO suicide is in their early 40s, with almost 17 years of experience on the job. So it's not always the young emotional cop who gets overwhelmed by stress and trauma who might harm themselves. It's sometimes the older cop who was stressed out and traumatized years ago, but now is unable to stay ahead of it because of age, illness, and other life complications. The warrior mentality pushes the older cop to keep going, even when he or she can't anymore, and something has to give. Maybe this leads to suicide, but there are also other ways for a cop to self-destruct. Today I'm talking to Norm Wielsch. Norm was a California cop who was successful in his career until post-traumatic stress injuries, health problems, and an addiction changed his life forever. Norm became a criminal and was sentenced to 14 years in prison. In this, the first of two parts, we'll discuss the trauma, the medical limitations, and the prescription med addiction that led to him ruining his career and ending up behind bars. Warning: this episode contains discussion of traumatic events and suicide attempts. Listener discretion is advised. Here is Norm Wielsch. Norm, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
I'm happy to have you. I'm happy to be able to talk to you about your experience and the wisdom you've gained from it. Can you tell me some good things about your career?
Oh, it's hard to talk positive about myself, but I've worked 26 years as a police officer, starting at Reserve in a small city, and then going to the police academy. And I think I did the right thing for a lot of years until my mishaps. But I always like to work the big cases. I used to like to nip it in the bud. Like, one of my favorite cases is a chemical company that was out here in the Bay Area that was selling red phosphorus and iodine to meth manufacturers. And we were after them for years and years and years, until finally I thought out of the box and went down a different approach, and finally getting them to close down on their own. And then being able to later do a search warrant on their house for records. And,
right.
He only got 1.5 years in prison, but we could prove that he contributed to the 1,600 pounds of methamphetamine manufacture here in California.
How much of your career was in narcotics?
16 in narcotics.
Oh, wow. Okay, so the lion's share of it.
Yeah. It was my opinion back then in the early 90s that when I was working patrol, I saw that the car burglaries, the residential burglaries, the commercial burglaries, they're all committed by addicts who are really just trying to get enough money and to trade stuff just to get high again. Mm-hmm. So I made the drug dealers my focus, and who would have thought that I would ever become a drug dealer? But that was my focus, and I think I did a good job, and that's why I did very well in narcotics, and I think it made an impact in the city that I worked.
Yeah, you were getting promoted and doing pretty well.
Yeah, I finally ended up in the rank of commander of the narcotic task force, which is equal to a lieutenant.
Okay,
and,
excellent.
And my career I thought was going very well. There was a couple of job openings coming up as a chief in a few small departments where I was being talked about, and then just life made me implode.
Yeah,
but my career was going real well, but my personal life was in the trash. Now,
part of the personal problems you were having were health related, right?
Well, yes, health related and mental. I had a mental diagnosis of PTSD.
Okay, can we talk about both of those?
Sure. Like any police officer, and I'm nothing special, so I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but my very first, I think it was 3 months on the job, I was a reserve, and I was a level 1 reserve, which means that I could drive alone. And, I was unsupervised.
Okay.
In the next city over, there's a shopping center, and the shopping center is right across, next to a freeway, and across the freeway is an airport. Well, one evening, which was actually December 23rd, I think it was 84. I think it was 84. And this airplane was trying to land at the airport, but the pilot had a physical ailment or something happened to him, and he crashed through the ceiling of the mall. And literally 50 yards away from the line of kids that were waiting to see Santa. And that was the most horrific thing. I mean, before that, I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood. I really had no experience with death.
Right.
And then seeing 14 dead and 72 injured, and it looked like a war zone. I mean, everything was burnt. It was just horrible. And
true mass casualty event. Right.
Yeah. And that was my indoctrination, into police work. But, my father was an ex-military guy, and he told me at a young age that you have to just bury your emotions. At 16, I had a friend of mine die in a motorcycle crash, and I was crying naturally, and he came in and told me to stop it, and I didn't stop it, and he basically slapped me upside the head and said, "Men, don't cry, suck it up." And that's the way I lived the rest of my life, which I didn't realize was going to implode on me in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of men have had that advice, and it's not served them very well. No.
That's right.
Yeah. And so you're going through your law enforcement career, and you're seeing a lot of bad stuff. You're seeing people, man's inhumanity to man, and you're seeing death and injury and that kind of thing. But you were having some physical limitations, right?
Yeah. In 1998, I was diagnosed with a neuromuscular disease, which is called peripheral neuropathy, just like diabetics have, but I'm not a diabetic, and a disease called Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, which causes atrophy in the muscles on the extremities. So what was happening is my calves are like bone thin, and what happens is you start developing these blisters or ulcers, they're called, on the bottom of the feet. And they just, it takes months and months to heal, sometimes surgeries. And when I was diagnosed with that, I didn't think it was such a big deal, but it really turned out to be a long-term, incurable disease that really affected my emotions. I went through a period of 10 years of surgeries, 2 surgeries a year, 30 surgeries total. So that's a little more than 2 a year, and all the time they would just give you Percocet, Vicodin, Oxy.
Sure.
But with neuropathy, you have no feeling in your feet. And I'm not blaming the doctors. Don't get me wrong. It's not the doctor's fault because they have a responsibility to work on the pain. But for somebody that has no pain, I found that by taking the pills, it took the edge off my PTSD. Like I was having such nightmares of the worst nightmare was the dead bodies. I would be walking through a misty field at night in uniform, and every dead body that I have taken were there. And it was to a point where I didn't even want to go to sleep. I was afraid to go to sleep. I was having panic attacks, anxiety attacks. So I noticed that the opioids, they took the edge off, right? I never drank my whole life. I really never drank alcohol. So maybe that's why I used the pills instead of drinking. And I had a lot of coworkers that I knew were drinking excessively, and but I didn't drink, and so it helped me get through the times of stressful. When your mind plays those tricks on you, and you got Satan lying in your ear.
Yeah,
and it really helped with that. But addiction is a slow process, right? So it goes from 1 or 2 a day to 10 a day to 20, 30 a day, in order to get through your day. And so I was basically a working addict. And I didn't ever thought I was, because we justify our behavior. And as a commander, I was out with the guys out there in the field, but because of my disease, I had a bunch of limitations, right? I used to always be like in the front of the stack, which means that they're always the first one to go into the house and stuff, or the second one. But because I wasn't as mobile as I used to be, I had to go to the back of the stack. And so,
see, now what does that do? What does that do to a cop from your point of view? What does that do to a cop to go from, okay, I am the apex predator, I am the star athlete, to suddenly having a physical limitation? I mean,
very, very difficult. Let me give you an example of the time. We were helping another city in a city called Richmond, and it's a very violent city. And there was like 20 of us. You know, I'm sure everybody's seen this on TV, where a whole row of officers with their guns out, you know, march to the house. Mm-hmm. And so I was towards the back, but there was a couple guys behind me. Now, part of my disease is that I don't have very much balance, and I have a left ankle that rolls. So because we were stacked so tight, I didn't see a pothole. So my ankle rolled and I fell. Praise God that I didn't shoot, because, you know, the training is for that. But everybody laughed at me, right? I probably would have laughed at somebody too, because that's the way cops do things, right? Firemen, cops, that's the way we do it. We take a bad situation and just make a joke out of it. But that incident affected me so profoundly that after we were done on the drive home, I just started bawling. I just started crying. I pulled over, and I was intending to commit suicide that night, because to me, I had been exposed, right? Yeah. I thought that I was doing a great job by hiding it, and that machoism, that warrior mentality, you know, you always stand up tall with your shoulders back, and, you know, you look people down and you don't back off, and, you know, but that's all a mask, right? And that had been a mask for me for years. And thank God this time that I think God was involved there and didn't allow me to pull the trigger. But that shows you how being exposed as being weak, and this is why I didn't go seek a psychologist too, because I got a bunch of guys come up to me all the time, go, why don't you just go see a psychologist? You know, why don't you just use your department's mental health service?
Right.
And you got to laugh, because I'm sure you know the first thing we do is, if we're honest with a psychologist that actually is employed by the city, and you say, yeah, last night I was feeling real bad and I stuck a gun in my mouth. The next you walk out the office, and the next call is going to be to the chief, and the next call from the chief is going to be to you to get in there and give the gun away.
Yeah, going to get a fit for duty report. Yeah,
exactly. And to be honest, I was not fit for duty. I admit that. But, you know, it's something in that warrior mentality that forces you to go on. It forces you to go on where you tear your rotator cuff, but you're still out there working, right?
Right.
You break a finger, but you're still out there working, you know? And I know a lot of people look down upon me for not seeking help, and I get it. I really do. But until you're in that position, it's really a difficult thing to do, to go get help.
Now, when it came to the physical injuries and stuff, you could hide that by just kind of muscling through. But how did you hide your growing addiction?
Well, it wasn't like I was nodding off, like taking fentanyl or heroin or anything like that. You know, so you're still awake. You know, although it's like a mind numbing, right? It's like a crutch. It numbs you to anything you feel. So if anything, it actually probably was better for me, because I was on the edge with anger, right? I was angry with everybody, you know, with my family for no reasons, you know, with God, with however I wound up like this, you know. Every day I would, even though I consider myself an atheist, well, God, why are you doing this to me? Why is this happening to me?
Right.
I'm 45 years old. You know, why is this happening? And you start blaming people. So you're so angry that it actually took the edge off of where I would jump down the throats of people who are, you know how guys get when, you know, hey, I pay your salary.
Right.
And before that, I would just let loose, you know, and it's the wrong thing to do. And I know that, but I was brought up old school. One of my first calls, I was able to chase down this parolee at large, and I caught him, right? But that was after Rodney King. So we were told only to use as much force as necessary. And so, but I was all proud. I bring this guy in, and I put him in the jail cell, and my crusty old sergeant comes out, looks at me, and my uniform's torn. He walks into the the cell and looks at that guy, and there's not a mark on him, right? I never punched him. I never, beat him or anything.
Right.
And he comes and tells me, basically, he says, listen, if you look like this, that guy at least had a broken arm. And next time you come in like this and he doesn't have any injuries, I don't even want to see you come back. I mean, that's how I was raised, right? Through the police department. I mean, everything has changed now and for the better, but it was more of a us against them mentality, and we're going to win, And so that's how I grew up. So I shouldn't say grew up, that's how I went through the ranks in the department. It was a whole different thing. So it actually took that edge off where I think I was a lot calmer. So I think the guys that I work with probably like me better on the pills than without.
Do you think they were aware of it, though? Do you think that did they just see you mellow, or were any of them perceptive enough to know, okay, something's different about Wielsch? He's different now. Do you think anybody picked up on it?
I don't know. Nobody ever talks to me. Any of the guys that I work for won't talk to me because now I'm a criminal. I'm a scumbag, and nobody wants to associate with me. I have heard a couple interviews of one or two guys that said they saw something different. I know one of my best friends who works for another agency. After my arrest, when I bailed out, he was one of the only guys that came by, and he said, "Hey, I saw some stuff in you, and I saw the difference in your personality, the way you spoke and the way you handled yourself, and I knew something was wrong, but I was afraid to say anything." And so he takes some of the blame, which is definitely not, that's nonsense. That he's not to blame for anything, but I think that's what happens in police work. Fire departments,
first responders,
room. Yeah, because we're afraid to bring that subject up because maybe we can see a weakness in ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's so I don't know. I don't know if they actually saw it or not, but I have heard rumblings that people said that, hey, they saw something, and then my wife gets all mad because she says, well, why didn't you say something?
Yeah.
But that's just not the way we do things.
That wasn't the culture. No. How many cops do you think fantasize about dying?
I didn't believe any at that time, but now I'd say there's a good percentage. I mean, maybe 10%, 8 to 10%.
Sure.
I mean, that was one of my things when I was going bad. I really thought to myself that I'd be better off gone. And I knew that I was already on a bad road. I hadn't committed any criminal acts, but I knew I was on a bad road. And I thought to myself, well, if I can get myself shot during a search warrant, because we would do normally 2-3 search warrants a day. I mean, we were a very busy task force. And I thought, okay, and one of the rules is never go into a room alone. And I would go into the rooms all by myself all the time.
Yeah.
But not thinking that I could get shot, and then be a paraplegic or I never thought about that. I just thought, okay, if I get shot, killed, my family, I'm a hero, nobody will think I'm a weak guy and stuff like that. I would drive like 80, 90 miles an hour.
Yes, I was just going to say that. Yep.
It was crazy.
Yeah, I think cops do that a lot. Yeah. I think they're like, it's okay if something bad happens, and so they take unnecessary risks, like driving motorcycles and whatever. Yeah. That I think there's more of that than we want to admit in police culture. Yeah.
It's because of that you see fallen officers' funerals. Everybody loves them. There's never a bad word said, and somehow that's an easier way out than to go out weak, right? So my attitude was, I'm not going to let this disease kick me out of law enforcement. I'm not going to be that one guy that, because he lost feeling his feet, he couldn't work anymore. No, I'm going to work through this. I'm going to work even harder. And it's definitely the wrong attitude. It definitely was. But, it's this job. And I'm not blaming the job, but I'm blaming it's the culture that we create within the job, right?
Yeah.
And this is promoted by the agencies, right? They say that, if you have an issue, you just come to us, but they promote the warrior mentality, just sometimes when you've been through a lot of things, your decision-making is a little bit different.
Yeah. Well, in law enforcement culture, we sometimes get unhealthy individuals who are experiencing unhealthy pressures from the culture around them. And the intentions may be good. Hey, we need to be bold, we need to be brave, we need to do good things. But that gets kind of twisted, and when a cop is unhealthy, it can become kind of distorted and lead to dangerous and self-destructive behaviors. And so you were putting yourself in all kinds of unnecessary risks, making entries and going places alone and driving too fast and that kind of thing. Could you talk about your suicide attempt?
I was driving, and it was dark, and I was just driving on this 2-lane freeway, and I just started crying. And like I said before, I think that my internal feeling was I've been exposed as weak, right? So now that I've been exposed for not being able to do my duty, take care of other officers, be there for other people in a backup kind of position, now they're going to shun me. Because it took a few years for me to really process all this stuff.
Right.
But that's what I really think I was doing internally. And because I'm a big guy, I'm 6'3", 250, so I've always been the one to stand out first, right? If somebody gets aggressive, and I think that finally being outed like that was scary, right? What were these guys thinking? What were they going to say tomorrow? So I pulled over on the side of the road on this dark frontage road, and it was very strange. It was, if I look back on it, it's just weird. I started cleaning up my car. You know how we go to McDonald's and we throw the stuff on the floor and stuff. So I cleaned up everything, and I always say I didn't want the cops responding to my suicide to think I was a pig, right? Because my car was all messy.
Yeah.
And I wrote a suicide note to my wife, and to take care of my kids, because I have 2 kids from a different marriage, and I just asked her to take care of the kids, and I told her I was sorry. And I sat there, and then all of a sudden through my mind came different suicides that I went to, right? That some that worked and some that didn't, right? Some guys survived it. And I didn't know how to really do it. Should I put the gun under my chin, in my mouth, the side of my head? And I think this gave me a longer time to really process what I was thinking about and doing. And I just couldn't get the guts to do it, which was, praise God. I knew God. Now I know God had a better plan for me. So, and then there was a second time there. I live on the Delta where we have river roads, and I was going up to Sacramento, and it was early in the morning, and I was just feeling real bad. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to buckle myself in the car. I'm going to roll down all the windows. I'm going to drive into this Delta. No, there's nobody around to see me. With my hands, at that point, my hands were so bad that I couldn't do zippers, right? My wife would sew Velcro into all my pants, all the BDU stuff. The uniform, I couldn't do buttons. I couldn't do zippers. I could barely tie my shoes. And now my hands are even worse. But I couldn't do things. So I knew that, okay, if I'm in the water, I'm not going to be able to unbuckle my seatbelt. And that's the way to go, right?
Wow.
And then some cars came by, and I don't know I guess maybe I really wasn't ready, but I truly believe in my heart it was God that was saying, no, you're not ready yet.
Wow.
And then my daughter ended up getting diagnosed with liver tumors, and she was 24 at the time. All my kids were adults at the time. And she needed, when she was a baby, she needed a bone marrow transplant, and I was a direct match with her. So I was able to donate that bone marrow. But see, that messed up my mind too, because now she's sick, right? And UCLA Medical Center said it's only a 50% survival of the surgery to remove these tumors.
Wow.
And then when I looked back, I thought to myself, okay, she's got my DNA. Okay, I'm messed up, right? I got bad feet, bad hands. I'm mentally ill. I knew there was something wrong inside me. And I blame myself for her imminent death. I mean, I was already killing her off before it even happened, right? And that just sent me down a spiral that I just never recovered from. And so from there on, I started taking more pills, and I made some really bad decisions, and it winded up in a 14-year prison sentence.
Norm will continue his story of his incarceration and the new direction that his life would go in the next episode. But I didn't want to leave you without some word of encouragement. So I asked Norm about the advice that he would give to a cop who needs to reach out. Here's an excerpt of that conversation. If cops are having trouble asking for help because they have physical injuries or addictions or other things that they're hiding, what would be your first thing that you would tell this cop?
I would say to go to somebody you trust and talk about it. Because I never really had somebody, all my friends are cops, right? And I think that's another thing that the police and first responder culture does is we start to isolate ourselves. Instead of having a variety of friends that could keep us grounded, then I think things would go a lot better. But if we hang out with people with our same attitudes, that it's us versus them, no one understands us, we're on an island by ourselves. And that's something that we will never be able to get away from and never really see our own character flaws. And I would also ask them to ask friends, mostly family, hey, do you see any changes in me? Because my wife said, I see these changes in you, and I just blew them off, right? If I would have listened to her and sought help in '04, geez,
your whole life might have been different. Yeah.
Whole life would have been different.
Getting to know Norm has been interesting on several levels, one of which is seeing the us versus them cultural dynamic of police versus criminals when an individual cop then crosses the line to the other side. Norm's crimes deserved to be punished. And to the degree that he was ostracized by his fellow cops, Norm would be the first one to say that he deserved that. But my question is, can that former cop, once shamed and shunned, and then properly punished, can he ever be redeemed? In part 2, we'll look at the results of Norm's downward spiral. We'll discuss his crime and his incarceration. And we'll also look at his remarkable journey from prison to his next chapter. On the next episode of Hey Chaplain.
And so eventually I pled guilty. And when I pled guilty, when I pled guilty, they took me into custody and they put me in a suicide cell for 1 year in the county jail in San Jose. And that was the worst I could ever, even my worst enemy, I wouldn't want to go through this. This is horrific, right? It's just, but God.
Specifically the isolation?
The isolation. You're all alone. You get the one phone call. I was only able to go outside to shower or to go outside 1 hour every 3 days. And the lights are on 24/7. There's no blankets. There's no pillow. You're basically on a yoga mat on a cement bed.
The views expressed here are the personal views of the host and our guest and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. If you like what you heard here, please share this episode with a cop or someone who loves a cop. Thank you for listening today. And as always, pray for peace in our city.